The Dragon Hunter's Great Katana is something that you want to get your hands on, especially if you enjoy burst damage that most of the time deletes enemies in seconds. I decided to optimize my previous build for this katana to make this build even more fun to play. I am the Samurai and I will be covering the Draco Samurai's playstyle, the latest equipment for this build, along with useful gameplay tips and more. If you love to make a build around the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, this video is for you. The Draco Samurai hits a ton of burst damage thanks to the unique skill of the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, which is the Dragonwood Slash. The Dragonwood Slash is a hard-hitting skill that optimally performs on both melee and ranged combat. Dealing stance damage is also one of the best things that this build can offer to the table, and we all know that when enemies are stance broken, it will lead the user to more damage. The Draco Samurai harnessed dragon powers after slaying countless dragons. These dragon powers are incantations that will give this build versatility and variety in terms of playstyle, having strength and dexterity as the build's main stats, with a little bit of arcane and fate, and for us to have access to our key buffs later on. Build playstyle is out of the way. Let's start this guide by tackling the Draco Samurai's stats. Note that I will be standardizing all of my builds around level 200, and it is up to you if you wish to level up this build fast around this level. Starting with Vigor first, and I allocated 50 points to Vigor since it is likely that the user will be getting hit while performing the Dragonwood Slash, especially when still adjusting to this skill. However, I am aware that there are a lot of beginners out there and it's okay to allocate 60 points to Vigor. It all boils down to how well you are adept in the game. Next is mine and 24 points were allocated to it. The Dragonwood Slash costs 18 focus points and this skill is not spammable due to its long charge time, so I think 24 points will do just fine. However, if you find yourself casting the incantations more often that we will be using in this build, I suggest having at least 30 points for mine. Endurance is next and I have allocated 30 points to it, and the Dragonwood Slash eats a lot of stamina, but if you will use it wisely, there is still a wiggle room for regular dodges. Again, you are not going to be able to spam this skill, so I think having 30 points is enough. Strength and Dexterity on the other hand are going to be our main stat for this build, so I suggest allocating 60 points for both Strength and Dexterity. Next is Fate, and 25 points were allotted to Fate so you can access attack and defense boosting incantations so we can increase the build's offensive and defensive capability, along with our offensive ones later on. We will be slotting offensive incantations as well later on, so 25 points will cover it as well. Lastly, disregard intelligence as we do not need it for this build. Stats are out of the way, let's move on to the Draco Samurai's equipment. And as usual, all of the items locations will be linked in the description section below along with a build showcase, so stay tuned for that as well. With stats out of the way, let's start with the build's main weapon, which is the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana. This Great Katana requires 15 strength and 20 dexterity to wield it properly and has both C rating for strength and dexterity. So far, I have covered all of the new katanas and Great Katanas in the game, and let me know in the comments which weapon or build you want me to cover next. So moving on, when it comes to Draco Samurai's bread and butter damage dealing attacks, the Dragonwood Slash bursts down targets into pieces. This skill can be versatile in both range and melee combat, making it an ideal and satisfying skill to use. The Dragonwood Slash is a chargeable skill, and once the user manages to fully charge it by holding the L2 button, it will glow and perform a leaping overhead slash and release a shockwave in the process, while the uncharged version is much faster and oftentimes being used in fast-moving enemies. It is also worth mentioning that the Dragonwood Slash skill will deal higher damage if the sword hits the target at point blank, since the blade and shockwave will simultaneously deal damage. Moving on to the Dragon Hunter's Katana's pros and cons, and talking about pros first, and as mentioned previously, since the Dragonwood Slash can release a shockwave when fully charged, it will give you versatility in combat. Not only you can deal huge amount of damage up close, but also can toast enemies when fighting from a distance, useful when the boss is unreachable due to a wide AoE attacks or when in the middle of a mechanic. Additionally, this Great Katana has native blood loss buildup when you are mostly using regular attacks. Expect to have bonus bleed procs in the process, however, this is not the sole focus of this build. Of course, like any other weapon, this weapon has its glaring downsides. Right off the bat, the Dragonwood Slash fully charged animation sure takes its time, leading to being open for enemy attacks can be mostly the cause of your deaths when not used properly. Another thing is this skill eats a lot of stamina. Adept users of this katana can squeeze in multiple dragon wood slashes in an opening, but I would still encourage anyone to use it wisely so you can have room for dodge rolls. Moving on to the build's secondary weapon, and I am using the Dragon Communion Seal here since we will be using arcane scaling offensive incantations later on. Weapons are out of the way, let's move on to my suggested spells. I mentioned that we will be accessing buffs when using this build, thus the first one on the list is Flame Grant Me Strength Incantation for an additional 20% physical attack boost and stamina recovery buff. The second buff on the list is of course our usual Golden Vow. This buff increases overall damage by 15% and adds 10% damage negation, which is very helpful. For the build's offensive incantations, the first one on the list is Dragon Claw. Since the Dragon Wood Slash has a limited range, this incantation can help you deal with large group of enemies easily. It can also stance break surrounding targets, so once they are down, you can easily end them with the Dragon Wood Slash. Same thing with Dragon Claw, the Dragon Maw can help you deal significant stance damage, especially when fighting bosses. However, it is worth noting that these offensive incantations are not the focus of this build, and the Dragon Wood Slash is still your bread and butter in terms of dealing damage. The offensive incantation that we slotted on this build are there for versatility and variety purposes. Not to mention, they match the build's theme pretty well. The last incantation on the list is Agheel Flame. Again, another good alternative when dealing with multiple enemies. Its cone-like range can greatly stall targets. But before anything else, only 6% of you who watch the channel regularly are subscribed, so help the channel by subscribing today and it's free anyway, and I will thank you forever. If you can hit that like button as well, it will surely help me a lot. We do have a Discord server as we are building an empire where you can find like-minded people who love the same genre. Now back into the video. Moving on to my talisman suggestions, and the first one on the list is our staple Shard of Alexander. This provides a 15% skill damage increase, especially when performing the Dragon Wood Slash. Highly recommended, so be sure to slot this one. The next talisman on the list is of course Godfrey Icon, which raises the attack power of charged spells and skills by 15%. I highly suggest slotting this one since it further increases the Dragon Wood Slash damage since it is a chargeable skill. The next talisman on the list is the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, which greatly increases stamina recovery. You will need this talisman more than ever since, as mentioned, the Dragon Wood Slash can deplete your stamina in seconds. The faster you regain stamina, the more you can dish out more Dragon Wood Slashes. For the next talisman, I suggest slotting the Two-Handed Sword Talisman. There is a high chance that you will be performing normal attacks, especially when dealing with fast-moving bosses or targets, and you've guessed it, you will be two-handing this weapon a lot. Moving on to Great Runes, and I suggest using Godric's Great Rune for the +5 stats across the board. Now that the main equipment is out of the way, let's move on to the Draco Samurai's armor set. And for this build, I am wearing the Drake Knight armor piece, gauntlets, and also leggings, while also wearing the Line of Reed's helm for my headpiece to retain the build's identity. And not to mention, it matched the theme pretty well. Moving on to my Flash of Wonders physique combination, since this build eats a lot of stamina, I highly suggest slotting in Green Burst Crystals here for better stamina recovery overall. For the second slot, I still suggest slotting in the Stormbarb Crack tier for more stance damage. The Dragon Wood Slash can stance break enemies when they get hit at point blank, so the faster you stance break enemies, so the more burst damage you can deal to them. Now that the stats are out of the way, let's move on to Draco Samurai's gameplay and optimization tips. More helpful tips that will help you master this build. The first tip on the list is of course optimizing your opener. Before or when the battle starts, what I usually do is cast Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength and pop my Flash of Wonders physique. Then I will try my best to deal the best damage possible during this burst opener since all of your buffs are active. You will be dealing tons of damage in the process if you do it correctly. The second tip on the list is to use your Dragon Wood Slash skill wisely. Believe me when I say that it is so addicting to use and it is easy to forget to just spam this skill. Since this skill has a long wind-up time when performing its fully charged version, you will be open for attacks which can be the cause of your death most of the time. Once you get the hang of this skill, you can effectively use its fully charged version without getting hit, even when dealing with fast-moving enemies. However, if you are having a hard time using it, I suggest just tapping L2 and use its uncharged version. In this way, you will still be dealing great damage on a single hit with a short wind-up time. For the next tip, I found out that after performing the Dragon Wood Slash, you can chain it to your normal attacks effectively. If you are good at using its charged version, you will have plenty amount of openings to deal with around 2 to 3 normal attacks, which even increases your DPS if you master this. Another fun samurai build to play in Shadow of the Erdtree. Its satisfying charge attack melts target to oblivion. As mentioned, comment down below which weapon would you like me to do next. If you made it this far, I just want to say that I appreciate you. As always, give this video a like if you get value out of it, and as it helps me a lot tremendously. And also, don't forget to subscribe for more builds soon. Now, if you want to shred enemies like butter or you want to update your Moonveil build, these build videos are for you. Thank you for watching as always, and I will catch you on the next one.